Sylara Keene never imagined that the two people she trusted most, her husband, Dain Mercer, and her mother, Lenora Keene, would shatter her world in the most unthinkable way. What started as a seemingly perfect marriage unraveled into a nightmare of lies, betrayal, and a scandal that would leave an entire town in shock. When Sylara discovered her husband's affair, the betrayal alone was devastating. But the true horror came when she realized the woman he had been with was her own mother, and that their secret had led to the birth of a child. Sylara Keene had always believed her life was close to perfect. She had a husband many women admired, a beautiful daughter she adored, and a home that felt warm and filled with love. Dain Mercer was everything she had ever wanted, charming, successful, and always ready with a reassuring smile. They had met in college, fallen in love quickly, and built a life that seemed unshakable. He worked in finance, providing stability, while she pursued her passion for interior design. Their daughter, Avon, was the light of their lives, and Sylara took pride in creating a home that felt safe and full of joy. From the outside, everything appeared flawless. They lived in a quiet town where people waved as they passed, where neighbors greeted each other by name, and where families gathered for weekend barbecues. Dain was well liked in their community, known for his generosity and easygoing nature. He was the kind of man who would help an elderly neighbor carry groceries or volunteer to coach Little League. To Sylara, he was not only a wonderful husband but a devoted father. She had no reason to suspect that something dark lurked beneath the surface. Lenora Keene had always been close to her daughter. As Sylara's mother, she took great pride in the family they had built together. After Sylara's father passed away years ago, Lenora leaned on her daughter more than ever. She was a regular presence in their home, offering to help with Avon whenever Sylara needed. It was a relief to have her mother's support. Between managing her career and being a mother, life was busy, and Lenora's presence provided an extra layer of comfort. She had a key to the house, often stopping by unannounced, and would frequently cook meals or clean up when Sylara was too exhausted. Dain and Lenora got along well, which was something Sylara had always been grateful for. Many people struggled with in-laws, but she never had to. Dain treated Lenora with kindness, always ensuring she felt welcome. Sometimes Sylara would tease them about how they acted more like friends than in-laws. She never saw the warning signs because she had no reason to. There was never a moment of hesitation or a single incident that made her question their closeness. Life moved forward in its usual rhythm. Workdays passed, weekends were spent together as a family, and Sylara counted herself lucky. She had everything she had ever wanted: a stable marriage, a loving child, and a mother who would do anything for her. The thought of betrayal had never crossed her mind. She trusted them both completely, believing they were just as invested in this family as she was. But the subtle cracks were already forming. If she had paid closer attention, she might have noticed the shift. The way Dain's touch became less frequent. The way Lenora started spending more time at their house even, when Sylara wasn't home. The way Dain's late nights at work started to increase, always excused by tight deadlines and important meetings. Little things, insignificant on their own, that together formed a much darker picture. There were moments of unease, ones Sylara brushed aside too easily. A quiet conversation that stopped the moment she entered the room. A lingering glance that seemed too long to be casual. The way Lenora's expression changed when Sylara spoke about how happy she was with Dain. She dismissed them all. After all, she had no reason to doubt the people she trusted most. The truth was slowly weaving its way through the fabric of her perfect life, and soon it would all come crashing down. You said, Sylara started to notice small things that didn't feel right. At first, they were easy to ignore, brushed off as coincidences or stress-related misunderstandings. But as the days passed, an unsettling feeling settled in the back of her mind, making her question things she never thought she would. Dain had always been a hard-working man. But lately, his late nights at the office had become more frequent. He would leave early in the morning and return long after Avon had gone to bed, barely acknowledging Sylara's concerns about his long hours. When she asked, he always had a reasonable explanation: deadlines, meetings, last-minute projects. It made sense, yet something about the way he avoided eye contact left her uneasy. Lenora had also changed in ways Sylara couldn't quite understand. She had always been a strong presence in their lives, helping whenever needed, but lately she had become oddly distant. She still showed up to care for Avon, but her energy had shifted. She seemed distracted, nervous even, avoiding direct eye contact and never lingering long after Sylara returned home. There were days when she looked exhausted, her usual polished appearance giving way to a disheveled look, as if she had spent the night wrestling with something too heavy to carry. When Sylara asked if everything was okay, Lenora forced a smile and assured her that everything was fine. But her eyes told a different story. The house itself seemed to hold secrets Sylara couldn't quite name. She started noticing the faint smell of Dain's cologne in rooms he hadn't been in, the scent lingering in places where it shouldn't. There were small, seemingly insignificant details that made her pause. Pillows on the couch slightly rearranged, the way a chair at the dining table seemed to have been recently occupied even though no one had been home. Her mother's perfume, a soft floral scent she had worn for years, seemed to cling to places it didn't belong. At first, Sylara convinced herself she was imagining things, but the feelings of unease refused to leave her. Dain had become more protective of his phone, a habit that hadn't existed before. He used to leave it out on the kitchen counter or on the nightstand without a second thought. But now, it was always in his pocket, or face down on the table. She noticed how quickly he responded to messages, how he would turn his body slightly, away when he checked his phone, as if shielding the screen from her view. More than once, she caught him typing, then deleting a message before sending it. When she questioned him about it, he dismissed her concerns with a quick laugh, saying she was overthinking things. Lenora had also started canceling their usual lunch dates, something they had done regularly for years. She always had a reason: doctor's appointments, errands, a friend in need. At first, Sylara believed her, but the excuses became too frequent to ignore. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, she saw a post from a mutual friend who had been with Lenora at a cafe at the same time Lenora had claimed to be at a doctor's appointment. It was a small lie, but it planted a seed of doubt that Sylara couldn't shake. One night, while folding laundry, Sylara found something that made her heart stop. A men's shirt, one that didn't belong to Dain, was tucked into the laundry basket. It was a simple, unmarked shirt, but something about it felt wrong. She held it in her hands, her mind racing with possibilities. Was it a mistake? A mix-up? In the wash? Or was it a sign of something far worse? Sleep no longer came easily. The weight of her suspicions kept her awake at night, replaying moments she had once ignored. Dain's excuses, Lenora's strange behavior, the feeling that something was slipping away from her control. She told herself she was being paranoid, that she was letting her imagination run wild. But deep down, she knew the truth was already creeping in, waiting for the moment it would finally reveal itself. Sylara's world shattered the moment she saw Lenora again. It had been months since her mother suddenly distanced herself, claiming health issues that required her to leave town for treatment. Sylara had been worried, but Lenora reassured her, through brief phone calls and text messages, never giving much detail but always insisting she would return soon. Then, without warning, she was back. But she wasn't alone. She carried a newborn baby in her arms, wrapped in a soft blue blanket, sleeping peacefully against her chest. The sight sent a chill through Sylara's body, though she couldn't yet understand why. Something about the baby unsettled her. It wasn't just the unexpectedness of it all. It was the way Lenora looked at her, the hesitation in her eyes, the weight of a secret pressing between them. Sylara felt her breath grow shallow, her thoughts scrambling for a logical explanation. Her mother had never mentioned being involved with anyone, never spoken of a relationship or a pregnancy. And yet, there she was, holding a child that had come from nowhere. Questions flooded Sylara's mind, each one more terrifying than the last. But before she could ask, before she could demand answers, she saw something that made her stomach drop. The baby's features were familiar in a way that made her feel sick. The dark hair, the sharp jawline, there was no denying it. The resemblance was there, unmistakable. It was Dain. She could see him in the child's face as clearly as if she were staring at her husband himself. The realization hit her all at once, like a violent storm crashing down. The truth she had refused to acknowledge, the doubts she had buried, all surfaced in an instant. Lenora's distance, her secrecy, the way Dain had grown cold and guarded, the stolen glances, the unexplained absences, the feeling that something had been slipping away from her for months. It had all led to this. Her husband, the man she had trusted with her heart, had been having an affair. And not just with anyone. With her own mother. Sylara felt her knees weaken, a dizzying rush of betrayal and nausea washing over her. It didn't seem real. It couldn't be real. She wanted to believe there was some mistake, some explanation that could make this anything other than what it was. But the evidence was in front of her, undeniable and horrifying. Her mother had carried her husband's child. The depth of the betrayal was beyond anything she could comprehend. The world around her blurred. She couldn't remember what was said next, couldn't process the excuses or apologies that may have followed. The walls of her perfect life had crumbled in an instant, leaving nothing but the ruins of trust and love behind. Dain had destroyed their marriage in the most unforgivable way, and Lenora, her mother, the woman who was supposed to protect her, had been complicit in it all. Anger burned inside her, mixing with heartbreak until it became something unrecognizable. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand an explanation that would never be enough. She thought about Avon, their innocent daughter, who had no idea that the family she knew had already been ripped apart. The betrayal didn't just break her, it shattered her entirely. And now, there was no going back. The life she had before was gone. What came next, she didn't yet know. But one thing was certain, she would never forgive them. Not Dain, not Lenora, not for this. Sylara's grief quickly turned into determination. She refused to let the betrayal define her, refused to let Dain and Lenora continue their lives as if nothing had happened. The pain of their deception had already stolen enough from her. But she wouldn't allow them to take her dignity, her daughter, or the future she had worked so hard to build. She needed justice, and she would stop at nothing to expose the truth. The first battle began at home. Dain tried to control the narrative, insisting that what happened wasn't what it seemed. He claimed it was a mistake, that he had been lost, that Lenora had been the one to take advantage of the situation. But Sylara knew better. She had seen the look in his eyes when he realized she had figured everything out. It wasn't regret, it was fear. Fear of what would happen next. Fear of the consequences she would bring down on him. She filed for divorce immediately. There was no hesitation, no second chances. He had taken everything from her, and she would take everything from him. She hired the best lawyer she could find, one who specialized in high-conflict divorces. Custody of Avon became her priority. She wouldn't allow her daughter to grow up in the middle of this disaster, to be exposed to the twisted relationship Dain and Lenora had created. But Dain wasn't willing to let go so easily. He fought her at every turn, hiring his own legal team to counter her demands. He argued that he was still a good father, that his relationship with Lenora had nothing to do with his ability to care for Avon. Sylara was disgusted. How could he even think he deserved to be a father after what he had done? How could he expect her to trust him after he had betrayed her in the worst way imaginable? Meanwhile, Lenora tried to disappear from the public eye, avoiding Sylara at all costs. She had left town again, this time taking the baby with her, hiding from the shame that followed her every step. But Sylara wasn't finished with her. She had spent her entire life respecting her mother, trusting her judgment, believing that she had her best interests at heart. Now she saw Lenora for what she truly was: selfish, deceitful, and utterly without remorse. As the divorce case dragged on, more secrets began to unravel. Investigators looked into Dain's financial records, revealing hidden accounts, money transfers that didn't add up, and a pattern of lies that stretched back years. He had been preparing for this, securing assets in his name, ensuring that, if the truth ever came out, he wouldn't be left with nothing. But Sylara had caught him before he could execute his full plan. She wasn't just fighting for her dignity anymore. She was fighting for everything he had tried to steal from her. The town turned against them. What had once been a well-respected family was now the subject of every whispered conversation. People stared when Dain walked down the street, their judgment heavy in the air. Lenora's name became synonymous with disgrace, her reputation destroyed overnight. No one defended them, no one sympathized. What they had done was beyond forgiveness. Then, just when Sylara thought she had uncovered the worst of it, a new revelation emerged, one that made her blood run cold. The affair hadn't been just a reckless decision between two consenting adults. Lenora, despite her silence, had been a victim in her own way. Dain had manipulated her, coerced her into secrecy, used his influence to keep her trapped in a situation she never had control over. The betrayal was worse than she had imagined. Dain wasn't just a cheating husband, he was something far more sinister, and Sylara was determined to make sure he paid for everything he had done. The final blow came when the full truth unraveled. Sylara had believed she knew the worst of it, that Dain had been unfaithful, that he had crossed an unforgivable line with her own mother, that he had fathered a child in the shadows of their family. But as investigators dug deeper, a far more sinister reality surfaced. Dain had not only deceived her, but had orchestrated every part of this betrayal with careful precision. Lenora had been more than just a willing participant. She had been trapped. At first, Sylara found it impossible to pity her mother, the woman who had stolen everything from her. But the truth was far more complicated than she had imagined. Dain had manipulated Lenora from the beginning, using secrets and threats to control her. Lenora had made mistakes, terrible ones, but she had also been a victim of a man who knew exactly how to exploit the people around him. Through legal proceedings, the depth of his deception was exposed. He had leveraged personal information against Lenora, things she had confided in him over the years, twisting her fears and weaknesses into weapons. He had convinced her that no one would believe her if she tried to expose him, that she would be the one to suffer, that she had already gone too far for anyone to see her as anything other than the villain. For months, she had lived in silence, fear, unable to escape the tangled web he had created. But the biggest revelation came in the form of DNA results. When the paternity of the child was officially tested, another horrifying truth emerged. Dain had been lying all along. The baby was not his. The real father was someone unknown, someone Lenora refused to speak about. This final twist shattered everything Dain had built his lies upon. He had destroyed his marriage, his family, and his reputation for a child that wasn't even his. The revelation sent shockwaves through the town, turning him into an even bigger spectacle of disgrace. With all the evidence stacked against him, there was no escaping justice. The financial fraud uncovered during the divorce case had already made him a person of interest, but now the manipulation and coercion of Lenora painted a darker picture, one that would follow him for the rest of his life. He was arrested, charged with financial crimes and coercion, and faced a legal battle he could not win. He had spent years playing games with people's lives, but in the end, he had lost everything. Sylara, though still wounded, found strength in the wreckage. She had spent months feeling like a victim, drowning in betrayal and heartbreak. But now, she was something else. She was free. Free from Dain's lies, free from the illusion of the life she had once clung to, free to rebuild a future that wasn't tainted by his deception. The pain would never fully leave her, but neither would the lessons she had learned. Lenora, broken by the weight of everything, left town once more, this time for good. She had no place in Sylara's life anymore. Whatever pain or regret she carried, she would carry alone. Sylara had no room for someone who had played a role in her destruction, no matter how complicated the truth had turned out to be. As for the child, an innocent victim in the chaos, Sylara chose not to dwell on his future. He was not responsible for his parents' sins. He would grow up away from the scandal, never knowing the full extent of the damage his existence had caused. Sylara moved forward, not because it was easy, but because she refused to let the past define her. The betrayal had nearly destroyed her, but in the end, it had only made her stronger. Dain had lost everything, but she had survived. And that, more than anything, was justice.